Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome to episode 3 of the series The Day the Music Died. Today we're gonna talk about Ritchie Valens, a teenager that brought Mexican folk music into the heart of American rock and roll and made it unforgettable. The song we're gonna be talking about today is La Bamba, which is a song that is inspired by a Mexican folk song. It's one of the coolest songs I've ever listened to and I'm so excited to talk about it today. So he was only 17 when that crash happened, and unfortunately he didn't get the chance to really launch his career further ahead. But even with that first song, again with Buddy Holly that we talked about last episode, he really put a permanent mark in the rock and roll history of America. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and watch a little bit of the song and then we'll talk more. So I couldn't find a really good video of him performing. If you guys have any suggestions or you've watched it, please let me know in the comments. And I didn't wanna, there is another guy that performed it as well and played in a movie, but I just wanted to find something original that the real Ritchie Valens actually sang that. So that's why I found this audio. This song that he got the inspiration from, the Mexican folk song, is a very old Mexican tune, and he basically revoked it into a rock and roll version, which I think it's really cool, because of all the guitar and then the rhythm and all the energy. This song actually was one of the first major hits in America that was actually in Spanish, so he did a great job, and then it opened a lot of doors after that for a lot of other hits in the future. This is an older version of La Bamba that was recorded in 1939, so it's very cool to listen to, and then you can see the difference between the rock and roll version that Ritchie Valens did and the original.
Para bailar la bamba se necesita una poca de gracia y otra cosita. Ahí arriba, arriba y arriba, yo no soy marinero, pero ti seré.
So I can link this in the description if you guys want to go listen to the whole thing. But let's go back to the Ritchie Valens La Bamba now. Also, something that it really caught my eye and it was really interesting, it has nothing to do with the music. I remember watching a bunch of TikToks and YouTubes a few months ago, and everyone was talking about how back in the days, the people who were younger or they were in their 20s or they were teenagers, they looked much older. So they were comparing the 30-year-olds back in the 50s or 60s or even 70s with the 30-year-olds now, and there were some theories behind how people look different and look much younger or more baby faced today. And I think this really shows it. When I first saw him, I was like, this does not look like a 17-year-old. And I think I don't know if that's a real thing or it was just happening by accident, but I do believe that's the case. So as we talked about it in the last episode, there was not enough seats on that plane, so some people were gonna take the tour bus, and we talked about how Waylon Jennings gave up his seat to the Big Bopper. But also there's an interesting and very chilling story about how Ritchie Valens also took the seat. Him and Tommy Alsop, his backup guitarist, Buddy Holly's backup guitarist, they flipped a coin. So all that started by like flipping a coin, and Valens called heads and he won. And he said, that's the first time I've ever won anything in my life. And ironically, years later, Tommy opened a bar in Dallas called Tommy's Heads Up Saloon. That once you know the story, that whole name like means something different. It's definitely a very like danceable and very cool song to listen to, and it's such a shame that with these like young musicians or in any field, like young people that really have these huge breakthroughs in life and they never get a chance to kind of like continue that and see what would have happened if they were living like a much longer life. It happens also, I know that we're talking about like mostly like pop music, rock and roll now, but it also happens in classical music all the time actually, and that really kept me thinking whenever I hear a story about like a young composer back in college or growing up about classical music. In classical music, that I would hear like Mozart, oh, he died such a young age, he was only in his 30s. And when you for example look at his last pieces of music that he composed, and you see so much difference from his earlier styles, and then remember that okay, the earlier style and the later style that we call it, it was not that much of a difference. He was not an old guy, he was like barely 35 or 36, and then you would just wonder, what if this person lived to be like 60 or 70? What kind of a change could we see in his work? Same with like Schubert, same with Chopin, all these like huge and great composers died such a young age. And it's very ironic that in classical music, Schubert, I think he was 32 when he died, and then the last few piano sonatas of Schubert, they're called his late sonatas. But then it's ironic because when you think about it, it's not like he was like 60 or 70 or something. He was still like in the prime of his life. And so it's such a shame. I mean, it's nice that they left something behind that they're always remembered by. So yeah, as we talked about it, he didn't have a long life, he didn't have much time, but even in that short amount of time, he showed us that rock and roll does not have one language. It can be any language, and it's just basically the spirit of it. And it's kind of like a nice intersection between like Spanish music or like Mexican, and marrying them into rock and roll. It's such a cool way of doing that. In our next episode, we're gonna talk about the Big Bopper. So make sure you follow me, subscribe to my channel, and like this video, and make sure to check back in tomorrow for that episode. And until then, take care, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.